episode of the Fortress of Filitude. In today's video, I'm actually going to do some crafting. I actually want to show how I made these round display bases for my rotating display. You may have seen some of these in the video I did where I kind of showed off some of the stuff I've made over the years. So I kind of wanted to do a video just to show you how I made these and give you some ideas. And well, that's it. Come with me and I'll show you how I made them. So initially I had to decide if I was going to use foamcore or XPS foam. I decided to go with the foamcore, the cheap dollar store foamcore, $1 a sheet. Easily peeled paper. You see here I was just tracing out with the rotating display stand to get the right size. I thought about going a little bit larger than the actual stand itself, but then just decided to keep the same size. No reason to really make it any bigger. And then just use a sharp X-Acto to cut out the circle. You could use any utility knife, but it's just easier using the X-Acto. It's a smaller blade, easier to control, so long as it's sharp. And there you can see, had to peel off the paper. First I thought about peeling off both sides and seeing if I could texture both sides. Ended up being just a little bit too flimsy. And then I was a little concerned that one side, once it was textured, might get mashed and kind of deformed when I textured the other side. So I decided to just do the one side. Kind of funny watching myself try to peel this off. It's pretty funny. Not to worry though, I did eventually get all of that peeled off. I did not use XPS foam, even though it could have. It's a little thicker, a lot more rigid, and definitely could have textured both sides that way. I might do something like that in the future, but I just wanted to do something simple, low cost, something that could be done pretty easily on a weekend. And there you can see, not exactly a perfect circle, but close enough. There's a 3D printed texture roller, cobblestone. I used that for one of them. And then I also had some texture rollers I got from Green Stuff World. Dark Runes, Alien Hive, Chaos, and a Call of Cthulhu themed one. I'll put links in the description below. If you don't have a texture roller, you can 3D print one or make one yourself, or buy one. You can always just use a pencil and a straight edge and put whatever decoration or impression texture that you want. This was for the retro sci-fi base. I didn't want it to look necessarily like a grim, dark future setting that some people might be more familiar with right now. I just kind of want to go something with a little more fun. After the initial grid lines were in, I decided to texture it. Just used some caps to make circles, and found some other bits and bobs around the craft desk just to press different shapes into the foam. You'd be surprised what you might find around the house you can use that will be useful just for making textures. You'd be surprised what you'd find sometimes, which you might not have considered before. I had this little small toy plastic flying saucer I thought might work pretty well, so I used it to press into one part, flipped it over and used the engine for another section. See there, it works pretty well on that foam. I mean, all you're doing is making an impression in foam that's not going to snap back. Pretty easy to do. Then I actually went back and actually added rivet holes around the plating with the pencil. Just another simple technique. Something you can do on your own without a texture roller or fancy tools. And then once you have all those done, and you have the textures ready to go, well, then the important part of covering it with black paint and Mod Podge to protect and give it some more strength. Even if you're not going to hit it with an aerosol can later, it's still a good way to protect and prime at the same time. So there's the cobblestone base. There's the retro sci-fi base with all the little textures in it, all done by hand. And then the sort of chaos things that should not be themed base. Yes, I know all 4 sections are not exactly symmetrical. They're not all the same size. It's part of the point. It kind of goes along with the theme. Just did a heavy dry brush, kind of an overbrush, to get the color on there. And here in a second, you'll see me actually go out of frame and start painting outside of the camera. Hey, Phil, you might want to bring that back in the cam. There you go. There you go. That's now people can see it. That's the way. And did all 4 panels in a different color just to give each texture something a little unique. You can see there, the blue, the green, the purple, the red. Each section's got a different texture on it from a different roller. I was a little concerned that those texture rollers wouldn't leave good enough impressions in that dollar store foam, but I was impressed. They did a really good job. There you can see I put a black wash on just to fill in some of those details, make them pop a little more. After that dried, I did go back over and do a little more dry brushing. Made a big difference. And here in a second, you'll be able to see the finished result before I sealed it. I think I did seal that one with a gloss Krylon sealer, but you can see the detail came out really well. I was pleased with how that came out. The cobblestone, same way, just an overbrush, a little heavier than a dry brush. It's not a complicated technique, doesn't take any special skill with a paintbrush. Pretty easy to do. Just did a basic gray over top of the black. And then I just added some other colors. I used, I think, a light gray, maybe a white, darker gray, brown, a tan. Just enough colors to give it some detail. I mean, this is a base used to display other things, so I'm not trying to draw attention away from whatever it is I'm going to display. There you go. See, there's the finished version. Looks pretty nice. And then the retro sci-fi base. So you see I've got all the detail there, and I painted it in kind of a cream color. I think that's buttermilk. Funny story about this one. I'll tell you more here in a second. But, yeah, just hand painted in some of the detail around some of the areas that were lined out already. Pretty easy to do because, if you kind of go over and get into those lines or kind of get on one of the next sections, it's easy to touch up, and any fuzziness around those lines gets taken care of once you do a wash and you kind of get enough cracks around it. I just did different colors. I tried to stick with some basic primary colors. Not going for grim dark, just going for something kind of fun, classic sci-fi. And you'll see here in a second what I was talking about earlier. You'll see when I put the first wash on, it didn't quite turn out the way I wanted it to. I ended up not being very happy with it. And there it is. I went with a brown wash, and it's just a little too dark, a little too dirty. I just was not happy with it. Ended up actually repainting this sucker entirely. It took about 3 coats of the buttermilk to get it back to the original color, and then had to redo all of it. You can see there the finished, 3 of the bases finished, and you can kind of see there how that retro sci-fi base got repainted and used a traditional black wash, which turned out much better. And for the outdoor base, I didn't use the Mod Podge black paint mixture. I just used yellow and green. I figured that would work pretty well if any of the flocking ever came off later. It wouldn't show up as much. It'd kind of blend in. So we used some basic watered down PVA Elmer's glue and brushed it on and then put down the flock. This is all scenic terrains, different types of gravel and grit, and then just normal grass and some rocks from the driveway. Tried to do a variation there so it wasn't all just one monolithic scene. There you can see a little closer. I think he did a dry brush there on the brown just to kind of give it a little more color, make the details show up a little more. And then there they are finished after they're sealed. Now you notice this one, you might notice it's a little bit warped. It's a little bit off. And I realized all of the painting on these and the sealing made them kind of buckle up a little bit. It's not too bad there because what I actually did, I ended up cutting a piece of cardboard and gluing it to the underside of those and then flatten them out under some heavy weights to make sure they dried flat, and that seemed to work. You'll see here in a second underneath the cobblestone base what I'm talking about. But otherwise the warpage isn't bad. It's not really noticeable, and for something as simple as this, for what I'm going to use them for, I'm not worried about it at all. And then last and not least is the outdoor base. I got a little more clump foliage on there too, also from Scenic Terrain. So there you have it. An easy craft, easy build, something you can do on a weekend afternoon and make use of for years to come. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, and we'll see you next time in the Fortress of Filitude.